Hi, friends. Welcome to Kira Gets Real Estate. Get it? So, what you will not find here, you will not get tax advice. I am not a CPA. You will not get legal advice. I am not an attorney. You will get real estate advice unless you're working with an agent, and then you have to ask them because you already have an agency relationship. If you are looking for just general advice to answer your questions, if you are in a contract, whether it's a buyer agreement or a listing contract, talk to your agent. Okay. Let's get started. First question, can we exclude John Smith from the listing contract? I get this fairly regularly, I would say, when I go to meet with a seller and we have a conversation, of course, and they may say, when we decided to sell, we talked to our neighbor because their daughter might be interested. She was looking for a house and she's not sure and yada, 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 right? Sometimes they put a sign in their yard in advance and we're trying to do it for sale by owner. And they had a couple people call and they're like, well, this person still said they might have interest, but we don't want to wait around for them. Can we exclude them from the listing contract? Do they always use those exact words? Almost never, but that's what they mean. That's the intent is, can we exclude them from the exclusive right to sell? So the exclusive right to sell contract literally says, check with your attorney. I'm not an attorney, but it generally says that if the house sells within the contract period, that we as the listing broker are owed compensation for that. And so if there's an exclusion to that agreement that is saying if Mr. John Smith buys the house, we are not owed compensation. And here is why I won't do that. Because if you have someone, for example, the situation where it's like the neighbor's daughter, right? And they're thinking about it, they might want to, they like it, they want to be there, they think it's too much money, they were hoping you just give them a deal. The minute it goes public, there's a sign in yard, it's all over the internet. Everyone else sees the photos. Now they have competition, right? So it can be very motivating for that buyer to all of a sudden realize, I just can't wait around forever and they'll save it for me. If I don't buy it, someone else will. And so they can be like, oh yeah, now I want to buy it. Well, that sale was brought about by us, not in the traditional sense of we found that buyer, but we motivated that buyer. We motivated that buyer to bring an offer. The other thing is, if you have a buyer who is considering it, right? And we list the house for 2 months and then they're like, we want to buy it. We didn't put out less effort. We still paid, and by we, I mean I, still paid for photos, drone photos, did videos, did print marketing, right? Like all the time and effort was still spent. And so it just isn't a wise business decision. The risk reward is not so far not in my favor that it doesn't make sense for me to take a listing with an exclusion, because I don't want to feel like, oh, I don't want to give it my all because if so-and-so buys it, I don't get paid, right? And you don't want me to feel like that either because you want me to do my very, very best. So it puts us in not a great situation. And you don't want to be in that contractually obligated situation like that with anyone. If I have a seller that says the neighbor's kid might want to buy it, or I showed it to these people when it was for sale by owner and they still may come to the table, I say to them, that's great. Here's what I think you should do. Give them a timeline, whatever you're comfortable with, whether it's a week or 6 months, whatever, that's up to you, Mr. Seller. And tell them that if they don't buy it by that date, you're going to list it for sale. Give them the opportunity if you want to. But once it's listed for sale publicly, then it would have to be through the listing broker, right? So I'm fine with you trying to sell it, but I don't want to also be putting my time, effort, and resources into it if I'm not going to have the opportunity to potentially close and get paid. So that's why I don't take a listing with an exclusion. You may find someone that does. It doesn't make sense for my business model, but that's me. So I would say about 7 years ago, every single real estate conference I went to or every class I took, every continuing education thing, somebody was saying, you have to do video. You have to do video. I don't care if you hate how you look. I don't care if you hate how you sound. It's the future. If you don't do it, you're going to become extinct. And, it took me about 4 years, maybe not quite that long, but eventually I started doing video, right? It's interesting because I also have a lot of information, I guess, coming at me, wanting to be comfortable in your own skin. And as we age as women, not trying to be pleasers, not trying to convince everybody to like us, right? So for a while, I was very torn by this because I felt like on one hand, I'm being told, You have to put yourself out there on the internet. You have to do video. You have to get people to like you, essentially, right? Is how I took it. And on the other hand, it's like, but be your own person, don't do things for other people to like you, that kind of thing, right? And then I'm not sure what I read or how it came to be. I somehow realized that what I'm doing on social media and in podcasting, right? It's not trying to get people to like me. If you don't like me, that's fine. If you don't like me, you're probably not watching this, or maybe you're just curious and waiting for me to light on fire. I don't know. But the goal isn't for you to like me. The goal is for you to get to know me enough to say, that lady is crazy. I'm not going to watch her. Or, oh, that lady's kind of funny. I like her. She knows what she's talking about. I'm gonna look for more, and maybe I'll call her when I need to buy a house or sell a house or tell my niece about her, or if she's looking, whatever. Right? The goal is to weed the people out. The goal is for them to get to know me. And if they like me, great. And if they don't, great. Because either way, we've done that first step. So it streamlines the interview process when you're looking to work with someone. If they've already seen a good sense of who you are without wasting anybody's time to even meet you, that helps, because the people that have seen me all over the internet have a sense of what they're getting into, right? And if that's not what they want, then they're not calling me. And so if that's not what they want, they're not calling me. And that's great, because they're not wasting their time and they're not wasting my time. So that gives me some peace about marketing myself and speaking to strangers on the internet. And if that's something you have to do in your life, or if that's something you want to do, that's not bad either. And I hope that gives you some peace, because if people are weeding themselves out, whether it's for business purposes or for friends, right? Like, that's still helpful. Any information they discover from that is helpful. Whether they say, this person is definitely for me, I'm in, or they say, oh, that person is not for me, I am out. Either is helpful. Okay. Can you sell? No, that's not the question. Can you buy a house when you have to sell one first? Yes, that's the short answer. Will it be more challenging? Yes. Is it kind of fun? Yes. I think challenges are fun. So it's another moving piece of the puzzle, right, in this strategy of real estate life. But absolutely, you can buy a house when you have to sell a house first. It's more challenging in certain markets. Like in 2021, it was very challenging, but I did help a couple people do it. It can be done in any market. It's just easier in some markets than others, or at least different pieces of the puzzle are easier and different pieces of the puzzle are harder, because typically either the selling or the buying is harder, right? And so when you're doing both, half of it is going to be challenging, or at least a little more challenging than the other half. So it may determine how you approach it. I do have a blog post about this on my website. If you're like super nerd, want it in print, got you. So if you are looking to buy a house and you have one to sell, there are a few things you can do. You can list your house for sale and then search for a house to buy. Some people are comfortable with that. Lots of people are risk adverse, and that scares the crap out of them, because they're like, if somebody loves my house, wants to buy it, I'm going to be homeless. Yes, that's a risk. So if you're the kind of person that would keep you up at night, don't do that, right? Like, that's okay. That gives you, though, the most negotiating power on the buy side, because if you can get under contract on the sell side first, you are less of a risk when you are going to buy. Those sellers that are looking at your offers are more comfortable knowing that you already are on your way on the sale, versus a buyer that says, I have to sell first. I haven't even started, but I promise you I will if you just accept my offer, right? There's a lot more risk there. Again, you should not choose the least risky option or the best negotiating option. You should choose the option that lets you sleep at night. So for most of my sellers that are buying and selling, they don't choose that option, because for most of them, that is way out of their comfort zone, right? And so they're like, nope, not okay with that. And I say, that's great. Let's not do that then. But I will give you all the options so that you can make the decision. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll have somebody that says, yes, here's our plan. We want to sell first because we want to know exactly what we're going to get. Gives us peace to know this is what we sold for. This is what our proceeds are. This is what we can spend on a new house. So therefore we have this plan. We're going to move in with my parents, or we have a short-term rental that we're going to go into, or whatever the case may be, right? They have a plan so that they're not homeless, which is always good. And it allows them to start the sell piece first. But like I said, most people, that's not the situation they're in. What we do is ideally, even if you're not going to start the sell piece first, I still want to see your house and give you an idea of what I think it would sell for, right? Because that's good information for you to have going into the buying side. Also, if you are pretty serious about this, I probably will want to do a lot of the legwork in advance to get your house ready to put on the market so that we can move quickly, because we want to be able to move quickly if you find a house you love. We want to be able to say, it's in the MLS, ready to go. We can have it live in an hour. And so for that to happen, I need to be at your house way before then, have professional photos taken, do room measurements, all of these good things, right? So that we can be ready to go the moment you find a house you love. And then on the buy side, when we go to make an offer on a house you love, we are going to want to give the strongest offer you can give that also suits your life, right? So if you are making an offer and we're in a situation where we haven't listed the house yet that you need to sell, and you're making an offer on another house, more than likely, you're going to have to make a pretty strong offer in this market for the seller to accept that, right? They're not going to accept, a lowball offer with extra contingencies and a contingency for you to have to sell first. Generally, they're not going to consider that. So just keep that in mind, that you're probably going to have to give a strong offer on the buy side if it's contingent on a sale. The other thing to keep in mind, and this, I should say this more often on the podcast, real estate is incredibly local. So if you are watching this from Idaho and then you say to your agent, well, this weird lady Kira on the internet said blah, 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 the agent is going to go, she knows nothing about Idaho real estate, or even more so Boise real estate, right? Like, it's so very local. So we use different terms. We have different contracts. Some states would close with attorneys, New York, some don't, lots don't. So please don't listen to this and then try to use this advice in your life. If you live somewhere way far away from the North Country, definitely talk to your local expert there. That's my tangent for that. What we do if we have a buyer who also has to sell, where the purchase is contingent on a sale, that's the way to say that, we include a 72-hour contingency, which generically states that if the seller accepts this offer and we go under contract, it is pending with contingency, or actually it's active with contingency, meaning the contingency to sell. If, let's call our buyer A, buyer B comes along, they don't have to sell. Buyer B makes a very competitive offer. The sellers say, well, we want buyer B's offer. It's a really good offer. They don't have to sell first. Less risk for us. Let's take it. They then have to give buyer A 72 hours to either remove the contingency or walk away. Most buyers in that situation, if they're buyer A and they have to sell, they're just going to walk away, because they're going to say, well, what are the odds of me getting my house under contract in 72 hours? I mean, sometimes if they have a bunch of showings, they may say, hey, let's wait it out. Maybe we'll get somebody good. There's a chance. But most of the time they say, yeah, I have to sell first. Never mind, we're out. But sometimes I will have a buyer that has to sell first, or a buyer that wants to sell first. That is actually pretty common, where they could get qualified for the purchase, meaning a bank will give them a mortgage, even though they already have one. Or maybe their house is paid off, and so a bank would give them a mortgage, but they don't want to do it that way, right? They would much rather sell and either pay that mortgage off or get all the proceeds and put that towards a purchase. But technically they can. So that is another option if you can stomach it and sleep at night, having two mortgages. It never hurts to ask your mortgage company, could I do this if I wanted to? Because even if we say, here's our offer contingent on a sale, right? It's nice to know our options if they get buyer B and invoke that 72-hour contingency. Because maybe what will happen if my buyer seller, buyer A, knows that they could if they had to, and that 72-hour contingency goes into effect, they may say, you know what? we didn't want to do it this way, but this is our dream house. We are willing to fight for it. We're going to just remove the contingency and buy it straight up and then hope to hell we sell our house real fast. So knowing in advance if that's even an option is just good information to have, right? Because in that moment, 72 hours isn't that long. If you're then going, well, wait, could we do this? What if we did that? Like, it's good to know that information at the beginning of the process. So that's the very long version. I'm sorry. But if it were your individual situation, we would be discussing more in detail, but more streamlined what applies to you. I'm trying to give an overview of any scenario, which is kind of ends up just being a lot of talking, but here we are. So if you have questions about that, I'm always happy to talk about that. I'm happy to come see your house, give you an idea of what you think it would sell for. Like, it's super normal to be like, hey, we might sell our house because we kind of want a bigger one, but it kind of depends on what we could sell this one for. And we don't know. That's super normal. What you need is more information. You can't move on with a decision until you have more information. So I am more than happy to come give you an idea of what I think your house would sell for in this market, talk about the process, talk about like what that would look like if you were to look for other houses and possibly sell yours and yada, yada, yada. That is fun for me. I'm a little weird. I know, but like talking through that process and figuring out solutions and all of that jazz. Love it, love it, love it. So never hesitate to reach out. You're not bothering me. You're not wasting my time. That is one of my most favorite things to do on the planet. Okay, so what items get prorated at closing? Again, this is, I assume, pretty local, although I think some version of it is very universal in our market. Certainly anything you pay in advance for more than the time you own it. But so like perfect example is real estate taxes. Typically you pay those either for the year in advance or maybe you're making quarterly payments, but either way you're paying in advance and you won't own it for the full year if you're closing and selling it, correct? So say you paid for the full year, you're closing on June 30th, the buyer will owe back 6 months of real estate taxes because you've paid 6 months forward of when they will own the property. That's a really easy example. It doesn't always work out super easy like that, but the attorneys will prorate all of the items. You don't have to worry about that. So it's the real estate taxes, like if you have a water bill, if you have public water or public sewer, anything like that gets prorated based on the closing date. Then also, if there is fuel oil in the tank or propane in the tank or firewood, the value of those things are owed back to the seller at closing because the buyer is getting the value of them. They're getting to use it, right? We're not emptying the fuel tank. The buyer gets the fuel. So they owe that money to the seller at closing. And again, the attorneys figure that out. We will take a photo of the fuel tank so that the attorneys have that information. And then they calculate that all when they figure out how much money the buyer needs to bring at closing. So that is one of many reasons, if you are a buyer, that the attorneys cannot give you an exact number of how much cash to close you'll need. They can't give you that number until we have a closing date because those items are prorated based on the closing date because that's when someone new will own it. Thank you all for being here. Just another plug for going on the website to www.witherwax.com to the podcast tab. There's a spot to give a question for us to answer on air. Please do that. We love to answer real questions from real humans out there in internet land. And I hope you all have a great day. Take care.